Your Legislators is made possible in part by the generous financial support of MAPE members, making Minnesota clean waters, safe communities, quality education, and veterans care happen. We work hard for Minnesotans. Minnesota Farmers Union, committed to helping develop and strengthen Minnesota rural communities since 1929. On the web at mfu.org. Live from St. Paul, Minnesota, we welcome you to another season of Your Legislators, a roundtable discussion featuring state lawmakers who are prepared to answer your questions and discuss important issues affecting citizens of Minnesota. Now, here's your moderator for tonight's program, Barry Anderson.
Good evening and welcome to Your Legislators. My name is Barry Anderson. I'm the moderator of this program, which most evenings brings you 4 legislators, hence the catchy name. But tonight it's a little different experience because it's Holy Week. We have legislators who have returned home, taking a little time off before they get back and finish up the legislative session. And so we bring you a special program tonight. You're seeing this program on a tape-delayed basis, so you don't need to call in any questions. We're not there, but we have had questions called in, and we're delighted to have with us tonight to answer those questions Myron Franz, who is the Commissioner of Revenue for the state of Minnesota. Now, we're going to cover some topics that deal with revenue, budgets, taxes, all of those areas we're going to be visiting with the Commissioner about. But before we do that, I think we should take a moment to introduce the Commissioner to the people of the state of Minnesota. I know you've had an opportunity to do that in other forums, but we're delighted that you're with us this evening. Commissioner Franz, tell us a little bit about your background and what leads you to public service here now as the Commissioner of Revenue.
Well, thank you, Justice Anderson, for being here tonight. It's a pleasure and an honor to be on this show. I watch it a lot. It's always a great opportunity to get to know your legislators, and I'm really pleased to be invited on as a special guest. I actually grew up in Kansas, went to law school at the University of Kansas, and then went off to Washington, D.C. to practice law for a while, and moved to Minneapolis in 1985 to work for a local law firm, Gray Plant, Moody & Bennett. So the opportunity to come here was a wonderful opportunity. When I was in D.C., though, I practiced at a tax law firm, and some of the people there had worked for the Treasury Department. And I thought about going to work for the Treasury Department at the time, but it just didn't work out. And so now, almost 30 years later, it's a really great opportunity for me that the governor has given me this opportunity to work as in his administration as a Commissioner of Revenue. So I've been in private practice for almost 27 years, ran a small company for a couple of years, but now this opportunity to return to government service, public practice is a wonderful opportunity for me. I'm looking forward to it.
That's a pretty good basketball team your alma mater has. I hear about this from my colleague David Strauss, who's of course also Kansas undergraduate and law school graduate, and he goes on at great length about the Jayhawks. So,
they're doing okay. My bracket's okay with the Jayhawks so far.
Well, very good, very good. Well, let's begin with some questions that our viewers have provided to us, and let's talk a little bit about the snowbird tax. Tell our viewers, we know we've heard some discussion from the governor about some changes in that. Tell our viewers what that's all about and what the controversy is about.
Well, we really, to kind of back up, so in terms of taxation of residents, we really have a situation where if you live here full-time, you're a resident for income tax purposes, and all your taxable income is taxable in Minnesota. We also have what we call the 163-day rule. So if you're here for more than 163 days out of a year, you're considered a full-time resident, even though you're not here maybe 4 or 5 months. Now, the so-called snowbird tax is that situation where you're here for less than 183 days, but more than 60 days. The governor was concerned that we have people who are here 4 and 5 months, 3, 4, 5 months, and yet they don't really pay any taxes other than maybe sales taxes on items that they buy. So he was concerned that we should try to have people pay their fair share. And so he has proposed a new part-time year resident tax, and that would be for those folks who have an abode for at least 6 months. So if you just rent a cabin for 60 days, that doesn't catch you. But if you rent a cabin, or if you have a house for at least 6 months out of the year, and you spend at least 60 days, but less than 183 days, then you would be a part-year resident. And under that scenario, those folks would get taxed based on the number of days they're actually in the state of Minnesota. So if you're here for 3 months, you'd get 3 months worth of your income tax to Minnesota. So it's designed to be a pro rata tax based on the amount of time you spend, as long as it's more than 60 days. Now the problem has really come in the industry, the tourist industry, and people are concerned that there are folks who might come up for 3 months a year, or rent a cabin for 3 months a year, or for 6 months, but be here for at least 3 months. So the governor's a little concerned that we may have made the rule a little too narrow, and so we're looking at whether it should be, should be 90 days or at least 3 months, up to 4 or 5 months. But the real key is trying to decide if there's some way that we can get those folks who spend at least 3, 4, 5, not quite 6 months in the state of Minnesota to pay at least a partial share of their income when they're in the state of Minnesota.
So the current status of this, it's not your job to track everything that's going on in the legislature, so I'm not necessarily asking you to get down into the weeds about what committee these things might be in, but the current status is this is still part of the governor's proposal, maybe tweaked some, and it's still part of the discussion that's going on at the legislature pending the wrap-up of the session.
Yes, it is. So it's in the governor's budget, and we just submitted a supplemental budget based on some changes that he made. So it's in the budget, and we'll talk about it in some of the committees, and there'll be some more hearings about it probably, and we may end up making some changes. And I think the key is we don't want to do it unless we can really make it one that people perceive as fair, and there are some people that are concerned about it. So we haven't finished tweaking it, I think is right.
All right, let's move on and talk about another issue that actually we've had several questions to legislators since we opened up our program for 2013 in early January dealing with this topic, and that's the taxation of electronic commerce transactions, businesses that don't have a physical presence in Minnesota. And as our viewers know from our legislative discussions, if you have a physical presence in Minnesota, you do pay sales tax. If you don't, courtesy of the United States Supreme Court decision, then Minnesota doesn't collect sales taxes on them. So perhaps you could talk a little bit about where that issue stands and why it's so important.
Well, you really set it up nicely, because I think it really was a 1992 decision, the Quill case in North Dakota, that the Supreme Court ruled that if you're going to tax an
and that's the folks in Washington D.C. That's not our little band of judges. So
that's right. The U.S. Supreme Court.
U.S. Supreme Court.
The other Supreme Court.
The other Supreme Court. Right.
And they ruled that in 1992 that if you're an out-of-state retailer and you're selling into a state, if you don't have any employees or if you don't have any stores, then you don't have what we call nexus, a physical connection to the state. So in that situation, you're not required to collect sales tax if you're an out-of-state retailer selling into a state. Well, that was 1992, and part of the rationale was, well, it's really complicated. It's hard to keep track of what the sales tax would be, and it would be a real burden on these companies. Well, it's not so much of a burden anymore, frankly, and also we have more of a national economy. So now we're looking at a situation where Minnesota in 2011 lost about $400 million in sales taxes from out-of-state retailers selling into the state of Minnesota. So it's a pretty significant issue now in terms of dollars and cents. But I think it's really helpful to kind of talk about the general rule. The general rule is that if you have a buyer and seller in Minnesota, then everybody knows you collect the sales tax. But if you have the buyer in Minnesota and the seller outside the state of Minnesota, like Amazon.com or Overstock.com, and they're selling into Minnesota without a physical presence, they don't have to collect the sales tax. Well, there's two things going on right now. The governor has proposed what we call the affiliate nexus or the Amazon tax, and that would say for those people like Amazon, they actually have certain people in the state selling on their behalf, but they're not traditional employees. They don't have a traditional store. So we would redefine what that physical connection would be to include affiliates or sponsors. And in those situations, if they had somebody in the state of Minnesota selling on their behalf, then they would have to collect sales tax. But that's a really tiny piece. It's only about $5 million a year in sales tax. The real issue is the Marketplace Fairness Act that's before Congress now. The Senate just last week actually passed the Marketplace Fairness Act that would require all out-of-state retailers, no matter where they are in the country, to collect the sales tax based on the destination of the product and turn it over to that state. And so if the House passes that and the President signs that, that would be at least a $400 million plus to the Minnesota state ledger.
My understanding is that was a sense of the Senate type resolution, so it's got a ways to go before it sees the light of day. And there's been some discussion in the industry, as I understand it, about where would you tax at, the purchase point or at the origin point? I don't want to get too deep in the taxation weeds here, but do you know what direction that's likely to go?
Well, you're right about the sense of the Senate, and it's been something that the states have been asking for a long time, and the Senate or House have not moved on it. So you don't want to get too optimistic about that yet. But it is, at this point, the Marketplace Fairness Act would tax it based on the destination, where it's received, so where the buyer is located. So if you buy something and it comes shipped to you in Minnesota, then it would be taxed at the destination of that product. Now, there are some ways you can game the system. Probably maybe get it shipped to a there's like 4 or 5 states that don't have sales taxes, so you could get it shipped there maybe and transferred. But it is still an issue that we're concerned about. But we really look at it as a matter of fairness, because so many times in like your hometown of Mankato, the local stores, they're collecting a sales tax. And why should someone who's selling into that marketplace not have to collect the sales tax too? In fact, you hear stories about stores where customers come up with a smartphone, and they look at the item in your store, and they see that's what they want to buy. Then they go online and purchase it. So some of our Main Street stores really have become showrooms for internet sellers, and it's not really fair.
Yeah, the dynamics of the issue are interesting, because you have small merchants who retail, physical merchants, who are obviously concerned about this and think the tax should be imposed. Actually, some larger merchants, the Amazons of the world, are less resistant to it these days, because they need distribution warehouses in so many states that the practical reality is they're not able to save as much money as they could, say, 10 years ago. But you've also got in Minnesota some small nationwide sellers on the internet who might not view this as favorable. So where you stand sort of depends on where you sit on this issue.
Oh, it really does. Target, and talk about the big companies, actually Target and Best Buy are strongly supportive of this now, because unlike Amazon, they literally have stores in every state. Right. And so even though they may sell a lot over the internet, because of their presence everywhere, they have to collect the sales tax. So there really is this idea about unfairness at the upper level with the big companies, and also on the local level. But you're right, there are some of those folks who can get engaged in these sponsorship programs that they would like to see this stay untaxed.
So just to drag this back to Minnesota, assuming Congress does not act, the governor's proposal then is focused on the affiliates. Then is that kind of where it goes?
Yeah, that's all we really feel we can do, is to focus on the affiliates at this time.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about an issue that is always of concern to our viewers in Minnesota, particularly in greater Minnesota, and actually, as it turns out, larger cities as well, local government aid. Talk a little bit about the current structure, what the governor has proposed, and any observations you might have about where we might be going with local government aid.
Boy, local government aid is one of those issues that's been around for a long, long time. Really began back in the 1970s, and it's a kind of a hot button, because you have to define what need certain cities have. So part of the challenge with local government aid is to determine what cities really have a need that goes beyond their ability to pay. So it's not a grant program or a revenue sharing program. It's really designed to make sure that the state collects these tax dollars and returns it to the local, especially local cities and also local counties. But the formula for the local cities requires that there be a need, an unmet need, and an inability of the local tax base to satisfy that need. The formula has changed many, many times over the years. The last big change was in 2002. So what the governor decided to do was to both do two things. First of all, increase the amount of money going to local governments and change the formula. So we have about $425 million that's given out in local government aid. The governor would increase that to cities, and the governor would increase that by $80 million. So it'd be over $500 million that would go out to aid beginning in 2014, and $40 million going out additional to counties. So that's part of the issue. Is in the last decade, cities and counties, the local government aid have been cut quite a bit, because with our budget crises, one of the things we typically do is the legislature and the governors have done the last 10 or 12 years is to go back and cut some of that aid. And the cities and counties have had to either reduce services or increase property taxes. And so that's why we've seen a big rise in property taxes. So right now, we have a proposal that would increase city government aid by $80 million a year, county government aid by $40 million, and change the formula going to the cities. The formula has generated some controversy, although I think we have it settled at this point.
So what are the changes? I mean, again, this could lead us into deep weeds here,
Yes.
but talk a little bit about the formula, because, of course, that is an area of concern between small cities and big cities, and the feeling is that maybe the formula has favored big cities. But anyway, at least among some Minnesotans.
Well, that's true, and I think one of the things that we tried to do with our new formula was to simplify it and make it more predictable. One of the things that cities complained about was they might get a local government aid of $500,000, for example, and the next year might be nothing, or it might go up a little bit. And they didn't like that fluctuation, the volatility, the lack of predictability, and they also didn't like the fact that the needs weren't really obvious. One of the measures in the old formula was the number of accidents in a particular city. Yeah, and that was designed to try to sort of show how much public service and how much traffic there was. Because it's an indicator of traffic, obviously, but it's also kind of an unusual indicator. So we tried to change the indicators to be more population-based, how much tax-exempt property. The more tax-exempt property you have, the more needs you have to fulfill without taxpayers being there. So we tried to come up with a new formula that was based on population changes, pre-1970 housing, because that's a good indicator of how old your infrastructure is, and also based on exempt property. So those are the ways we sort of went after it. But we found that in looking at the formula, the results of the formula, that it did tend to favor the suburban areas more than the greater Minnesota, and that was something we didn't want to do. So in the meantime, a number of different groups got together, cities and counties and different advocates, and they came up with a different proposal. It's based on 3 different formulas. So they have a formula for those cities under $2,500, under 2,500 people, then between 2,500 and I think it's 200,000, then 200,000 and on up. And their rationale was you really can't throw all these cities in the same pool. There's just so much difference between a really small city. And, when we looked at it now, we think it's going to work because all the different groups have agreed to it. But the other thing about it is it's a little bit more stable. And what it does is it takes where everybody is right now and adds on the new investment the governor's willing to make, the $80 million. But it makes sure that if you change off that over time, it's a very small change, so that if, in fact, your need comes down, your formula amount will come down, but much slower and over more time, so that a city has time to prepare for a declining local government aid apportionment. So it's designed to help cities plan a little bit better. It's designed to help articulate what is the need that they have, that they need to, and some of it involves public safety, the amount of roads that you have. So we think the formula that we now have is more intuitive, more stable, and a lot more people agree to it now than before. So we're making progress, but it's hard to get a formula that everyone around the state agrees to.
Well, if you change the formula, there are winners and losers. The winners are happy, the losers aren't.
It's tax policy by spreadsheet, which is really a hard thing to do, frankly. Yeah.
And you think there's a pretty good chance that something along these lines, subject to tweaking and so forth, is likely to come out of this legislative session?
I think so. I'm pretty optimistic. I think on Tuesday and Wednesday, in the House Property Tax Division, Chair Jim Davney will have the markup on that bill, and it looks like it's going to come. There's one controversial aspect to it, and this is something that I think the viewers might find interesting, and that is, right now the formula has an automatic inflation adjuster in it. Mm-hmm. Now, as we all know, the budget doesn't include inflation. When the governor prepares a budget or the legislature passes a budget, there's no inflation figured into that. And that's a problem because, for example, the governor's budget that he currently has proposed for 2014 and 2015 has no inflation adjustment in it, but we will absorb about $890 million worth of inflation over the next 2 years in this budget. So it is a cut, if you will, and you have to adjust for it. Now, this formula has an automatic inflation adjuster and population adjuster in there. And it's not that we don't think that's an important thing to do, to set the bar and keep investing in local governments, but it's a little difficult to do it just for this program and not others. And so we're looking at that kind of careful because The other thing is you just don't want to make additional grants to cities and counties without going through the process. Again, the legislature could always change it in the future anyway. But that's one of the issues that we have to kind of sort out, is that inflation adjuster.
And of course, budgets of state governments and the federal government have been affected by programs that are on sort of autopilot with automatic increases, and that creates issues when revenues don't come in the way they are expected. So,
well, yeah, it's a really good point. I think any policy person has got to be careful about. I mean, that's what the legislature is there for. If in 2 years there needs to be an additional investment, and maybe it's based on inflation, maybe something else, then they should make that decision. And so it is hard to kind of have those automatic adjusters in there, because you never know what the economy is going to do. The Great Recession of 2008 has taught that to us in a very painful way.
Let's talk a little bit about the Office of the Commissioner of Revenue, the number of employees you have working for you. What exactly does the Revenue Department do? Where are they located? Give our viewers some sense of the very small empire that you have there, that you run as the commissioner, and what its responsibilities are.
Well, we have about 1,500 employees, and we're located just not very far from where we're filming this, and that is on Robert Street, right near the health department, or the Freeman Building is across the street, the health department, then the Stassen Building is right there at 600 North Robert Street, really about 2-3 blocks from the Capitol, so it's a nice brisk walk to walk by here, the judicial building on the way to the Capitol. So we have about 1,500 people. Some of those folks are in, we have about 100 people in Ely. We have some folks scattered around the state, but most of them are at 600 Robert Street. And what we really do is we try to enforce and educate people about how to comply with the law, and the enforcement aspect comes in too. But really our goals have been to try to increase the ability of citizens to access and understand the tax system, and it's complicated in Minnesota. It's not a very simple system, and so we have a real challenge, I think, to have outreach and to educate people. So we have a new website. It's revenue.state.mn.us, and this new website came online last year, and it's a much better website than before in the sense of it's easier to find things, to search for documents, and we have things categorized by individuals, by businesses, and tax-exempt organizations. But the key is to try to make sure that everything people need to know is available there. Plus, we have a lot of people who answer the phone and give advice. We get lots and lots of calls, especially during tax filing season. So we do a lot of direct outreach, direct helping of taxpayers and filling out their forms. But then we also have an enforcement aspect too, where we really have to audit and examine certain taxpayers. But we have, the sales tax, we have the income tax, we have corporate income tax, a lot of special taxes, alcohol taxes, tobacco taxes, and those are things we have to administer and make sure that those are being paid appropriately. I think one of the things that we've learned is that the more we can give information to the taxpayers, the better information we get from them. 97% of the revenue comes from voluntary compliance. And so the other 3% we go out and enforce and collect money, but it's really important that we make sure people have access to information. We just have a new system for businesses where you can access your account 24/7. So if you're a business taxpayer, you can go online into your account, find out, look at your payments, look at all the correspondence. You can change your withholding payments, or you can change your payments online, make payments online. So we've really tried to make it much more user-friendly, because the more we can do that, the more opportunity people have to pay voluntarily. So we have a really talented bunch of people. Most of the folks have some kind of business or accounting background in our audit staff and in promoting our laws and enforcing those. So we are hiring, by the way, most of the time. So if people are interested in a job at the Department of Revenue, they should go on site and look for job opportunities, because there's turnover. When the economy gets better, actually, like it is now, we tend to lose some of our employees because they come to the Department of Revenue, they get trained in fiscal and accounting and tax issues, and then they get hired away by private industry, which is good. I mean, it's a good thing, but we do have a kind of a big turnover sometimes. So it's a wonderful opportunity for people. But some people stay there for many years. I've been to many retirements lately, people who have been there over 30 years, 35, 36 years. So we have a lot of longevity, but we're also bringing on a lot of new people. So it's a fun place to work.
There's no substitute for that institutional memory. It can be very valuable. So
it really can.
Let's talk go back to some specific questions from viewers. Viewer from Tyler thinks we should increase the gas tax. Are you involved in gas tax discussions, and what, if anything, is happening there?
Yeah, that I am. And one of the things, we had a lot of discussions about the gas tax. And this last year, as the viewer may be aware, there was a study done, a task force on transportation taxation. There is a concern as vehicles get more and more fuel efficient and they're running on less and less gas, more and more miles, the old gas tax doesn't quite work as well. And so there are some folks who want to try to transition the gas tax into some kind of a mileage-based tax. There are some who want to try or index it to inflation. There's a lot of discussion about it. The governor decided at this point not to make any proposed changes to the gasoline tax, and feeling that would just hit the middle class people too much in Minnesota. But we're looking at that. The new commissioner, Charlie Zelle, is the new commissioner of transportation, and the governor's really said, listen, in the next year or so, let's come up with some plans about long-term, how do we fund our roads and infrastructure and mass transit with gasoline taxes or user taxes. We need to think about globally how to do this, because the old ways may not be sufficient. There is a proposal in the governor's package to increase the 7-county the sales tax for the transit system. So that's one area where we're talking about trying to increase revenue through a sales tax to support a metro transit system, which is typically what's done around the country for transit. But that doesn't deal with the issue of greater Minnesota and the roads, and that is something that's still on the table. The governor does not have a proposal on that. There are some floating around in the legislature that we might consider, but at this point there's nothing on the table.
For those viewers who are interested in this topic, the Star Tribune this morning had an interesting article about the gas mileage program, the keeping track of the mileage program using GPS devices, and I think it was a pilot study, and I think the conclusion one could reach is that it's not ready for prime time.
Yeah, there's a lot of controversy about that. I mean, it's sort of interesting. You talk about, the mileage tax, the vehicle or gasoline tax really is a user-based fee, right? And so the whole idea with the mileage base is, well, if you're going to drive 1,000 miles and I'm only going to drive 10, you should be paying for your 1,000 miles and I should just pay for my 10. But it's very controversial.
And one of the issues that we face is that although the electric vehicle industry has its own set of problems, and that industry has not taken off perhaps as some expected it might, it is conceivable as the years go by that you will have vehicles that don't use petroleum-based fuel, and you're not then capturing the revenue from those either. So. Well,
exactly. And there's a fleet of trucks that are being propane. I don't know if propane gas is
natural gas.
Natural gas, right, that they're using for trucks, because it's particularly efficient for trucks. Once again, you've got to figure out, well, so how many metric centimeters of that stuff should you tax at? So the whole idea about using the roads and paying for them is really going to be something we have to look at as a country, I think.
We have had questions from viewers about bridge construction, particularly bridges that, large bridges that go over states, Wisconsin being the most recent example. And there's been some discussion about possible toll roads. Does your department get involved in any of, or toll bridges, I should say? Does your department get involved in any of those conversations?
Not really, because the whole idea of fees and tolls is really one of those that the Department of Transportation deals with. And that's a thorny issue, because in many, many states, the user-based fees, toll roads, really pay for themselves. They pay for the upkeep and the maintenance. So there's a lot to be said for that. And now, especially when you have these little transponders, so you don't have to actually have a toll booth, it makes it a little bit easier for most people. But that's pretty controversial. And we've had a few in Minnesota with the new high occupancy vehicle lanes we have in 394 and 35W that seem to be working, but there's still a lot of controversy. But I've been able to stay out of that one.
That's somebody else's problem. You have your own problems, right?
That's right.
All right.
Got a few.
Yes, exactly. All right. A viewer from Herman wants to know: does the Department of Revenue get dollars from sales tax or other sources from these sand mines that we've had some discussion about? The whole fracking controversy. And is our revenue in any way affected by that? Frack
sand mining is the new issue. In fact, we're working. I made several calls yesterday talking to the senators and legislators about frack sand. It's typically been taxed at the local level, at the county level. Some counties have levied a local tax on frac sand mining. But it's not been done with any kind of a overall basis in terms of trying to make sure there are regulations to control how it's done and making sure there are certain standards about reclamation when it's over with. Frac sand mining has the potential to really have some health issues as well. So the governor does have a proposal to set up a system of regulation through the PCA and the DNR and some other agencies to make sure there's oversight of this going forward, number one. Because if this is going to continue, it could have pretty significant effects on local areas, especially down in the southeast part of the state. So we want to implement some regulations, some oversight, some health standards, and at the same time, we are looking at imposing either fees or taxes, because it is somewhat like a mining tax in the sense that it's a resource that's being depleted and it's going to be gone once you mine it or take it out. So we're looking at that. What happens with frac sand mining, though, is there's two different processes. Number one, you take the sand out of the ground, and then number two, you wash it, because you don't want to transport all the extra stuff with the sand. You want to really have it at least washed down, so you're only transporting the sand. And so those two things sometimes don't occur on the same site, and some of it occurs out of state. It gets mined here, gets cleaned maybe in Wisconsin, then it gets shipped to North Dakota. So there are a number of different ways we're trying to look at. Do we look at taxing the excavation of the frac sand, or just the washing, or both? And the roads are going to be really affected, local roads. The health issue about the material, the particulates in the air. So it's a pretty thorny issue. We've got a bill we're working on, and both the Senate and the House have some proposals that we're working on. So I think there's going to be something done on frac sand mining. The problem is it's kind of complicated, and it's a new industry. We don't really know which way it's going, but it is valuable. It's a valuable commodity, so we need to figure out how we want to tax or provide fees for the state of Minnesota on that.
Lots of questions from viewers about property taxes. The viewer from Brainerd's concerned about property tax on lake cabins and so forth, second property, so to speak. Other viewers suggest that there should be some property tax reform, particularly for senior citizens, a suggestion about capping property taxes. And, of course, the governor made a proposal on property taxes, which I think is off the table now as a result of the revised budget. So let's visit a little bit here about property taxes. And where do you see that going, and what are the issues that we face here?
Boy, property taxes. One of the things that the governor asked me to do about over a year ago was to travel around the state and have a number of town halls and meetings with people about the tax system in general. One of the things that I heard, and one of the things that he heard a lot, was that property taxes have just gotten out of hand. Property taxes in the last 10 years have risen about 86% statewide. Now, some people point out that the property taxes are not at a high level in terms of comparing it to other states. And it's true, property taxes are we're sort of in the middle of the country. But nonetheless, there's been this rapid increase. Part of it is because local government aid's been cut, and cities and counties have had to raise property taxes. School districts have had to go for more money because there's been not enough funding in the school, in our K through 12 education. So property taxes, it's a big issue. The governor gets it, I get it, the legislature gets it. The question is, what do you do, and how do you make the property tax relief help everybody? And that was the governor's proposal on the rebate, was one way to increase the sales tax revenues, but use some of that to buy down, if you will, the property tax burden. But when we took the sales tax issue off the table, we obviously didn't have the revenue to do the property tax refund. So what we're looking at right now is a local government aid. By putting $120 million in local government aid in 2014, that will help. About half of that goes to property tax relief, typically. So that's one way we're going to help. The other way we're going to help with property taxes is what we call the renter's credit. So as you know, there are two different what we call circuit breakers. So if you own a home and your income's below a certain level, you can get property tax relief based on your property taxes. Or if you rent, you can also get relief based on the amount of rent you pay as a renter. We're going to increase the amount that renters can get this next year because one of the things we've learned is renters' credits have been cut over the last several years, and that's increased the portion of property taxes paid by the lower income folks in Minnesota. So those are a couple of areas we're looking at. Frankly, the number one one of the number one issues with property tax really is school aid, and to the extent schools pass levies and put more and more of a burden on local property tax owners, that really creates a real burden for the local property tax owners. That's one of the reasons why we need to look at funding for K-12, because that is a big pressure point for property taxes. Now, the cabin owners, they have not been part of the school district taxation system, so there are some folks who think they should be put back into that system. The caller may not like that idea, but this is a really complicated area. And in addition, we have the most complicated property tax system in the country. 55 classes of property taxes. The closest state, I think, has 11. So, I mean, we're kind of overachieved. I think part of what happens, though, we're trying to solve problems, right? The more complex our system is, and you see this on the Supreme Court,
right,
the more complex our system is, it means we're trying to solve problems. And that's good. I mean, that's what we try to do. But when we make it so complex, you can't really change it. It's a real problem. To eliminate some of those classes costs money, because almost every class is below the standard property tax class. So if you're going to eliminate some, you've got to figure out ways to get rid of the winner. There'll be winners and losers, and you've got to deal with that. So the property tax simplification is something we don't want to give up on, although I just don't think we'll do much this year. I think the Senate is looking at some property tax areas in terms of making more contributions to the general ed levy and reducing property taxes that way. The House is looking at some homestead credit restoration issues. So there's a lot going on in the property tax area that hasn't been settled yet. There'll be some relief. I'm just not sure how much at this point.
Mayo Clinic, a lot of interest in that proposal. We have had a legislator from the Rochester area with us twice who's talked, I think, very persuasively about the importance of the Mayo Clinic to the state of Minnesota. I think we all get that. But I understand there are some challenges with what I call sort of a tax increment form of financing. That's probably a little bit unfair to characterize it that way, but can you talk a little bit about, I'm sure your department's involved in studying that, and I'm not asking you to tell us what you think we should do, but maybe give our viewers a little picture into what the problem is here.
Well, I couldn't tell you because I don't know yet what we think we should do. In fact, the governor just announced the other day that Tina Smith, the chief of staff, is going to be in charge of leading the administration's efforts to try to come up with a solution. Here's the problem, stepping back a little bit, when should we make these investments for different companies, whether it's the Mayo Clinic or whether it's the Viking Stadium or the University of Minnesota, they have a new biomedical facility. The decision to jump in and make those additional contributions is a difficult one, because you really want to make sure that you're doing it in a way that's fair to all taxpayers in the state of Minnesota. Clearly, in the case of the Mayo, who wouldn't want the Mayo to stay here and make this their headquarters? So it's a laudable goal, and the governor is supportive of it, but the governor's tasked Tina Smith and Commissioner Showalter at MMB and myself trying to come up with some ways to fix it. But you are right in the sense it is a little bit like a tax increment financing. So what they really have proposed initially was that based on the growth in corporate taxes, sales taxes, income taxes in that area, we would capture part of that growth and give it back to the infrastructure to make investments in the infrastructure. So the Mayo Clinic wants to do their investment in their own private buildings, but they want the state to help the city of Rochester make investments in the infrastructure, in roads and parking ramps and other facilities. And really tiffing, if you will, tiffing income tax and corporate tax has never been done before, and it's something we really have a problem with. So we're trying to figure out, are there some ways that we can put some measures there to make sure that if the Mayo invests money in a new building or a new lab or bringing on a new center, then we will in turn use that as a measure to invest more, whether it's through bonding or direct appropriation. So we're trying to figure out a way to match their investment that would trigger the state's investment in the infrastructure. And how would we go about doing that? I mean, bonding is one of the ways you think about typically. The problem is you don't want this sole project to take up too much of the overall bonding requirements. They propose like $585 million over 20 or 30 years. And that's certainly doable in terms of bonding, but you just have to balance that with other bonding requirements. So I think the goal right now that Tina Smith is embarked on, that I'm trying to help her with, is trying to design how do we respond to the Mayo in a way that shows the state of Minnesota is willing to help partner with them to keep their facility here, keep their destination medical center here, and help the city of Rochester fund these improvements, and they need some kind of assurance that we'll do it. And so they want to set up a mechanism that provides that assurance, because they're going to invest billions of dollars in this project. And I think that's a real challenge now, is trying to figure out a way to do it that is fair, doesn't overburden the tax system, and is consistent with the way we fund other projects around the state. Because typically we have the local entities, like the University of Minnesota. They contributed a certain amount of money on their bonding projects, and we really would want to make sure that Rochester contributes something to the process as well. I'm sure Senator Sinjum has mentioned that as well, that they really want to partner with the Mayo to make this happen, but it's complicated, and we're not there yet.
Is this something that gets done this legislative session, or is this a next year legislative session, or not put you on the spot, I guess we don't know, but...
I thought you promised me no hard questions.
Well, that's right, exactly, yeah. The idea is to get you here, and then we ask the hard questions.
That's a hard question, and it's an excellent question. I don't know the answer. I mean, the governor really wants us to get it done this session. He's told Tina Smith and Commissioner Showalter and myself, let's work on this, let's see what we can do to put together a package that makes sense for the state of Minnesota, and see if the Mayo will accept that. So it's people are working as if it's going to get done this session. It's a lot to get done, because remember the Viking Stadium, how many different sessions did that go through before it finally passed? So the Vikings proposal, for example, is a good one to look at, because there was something that was studied, hundreds of hearings about, and the process finally came last year. But it took a lot of work even last year, even though that had been around for a while. This is a relatively new proposal. So it's asking a lot to get it done this session, but I think it's something we're all working on. I know that I was talking with Senator Skoye, the chair of the Senate Tax Committee, and Chair Lincheski, the head of the House Tax Committee, and they're working really hard, too, to figure out if there's some way we can make this happen this year.
We have some questions from viewers about sales taxes and exemptions from sales taxes. Some viewers think we should be taxing clothing, for example, and aren't. Others think we shouldn't. We have a viewer from southern Minnesota who asks specifically, why do organizations like AgStar not have to pay sales tax? I'm not sure that I know the specifics behind that. I don't know if you do, but maybe you can address that. Talk a little bit about the sales tax process and what does that mean to the state of Minnesota?
We have a lot of exemptions. There are a lot of exemptions in the agricultural area and farming. So if you buy farm products or farm services, those are tax exempt. Most of them are tax exempt. And back about 10, 20 years ago, there were some exemptions added in the agricultural area. The problem with our sales tax system is it is so full of holes that it just doesn't generate very much income or revenue. So what's happened back in 1967, when the sales tax was first implemented, it was based on a goods economy. 2/3 of all purchases in the 1960s were for goods, not services. Now, 2/3 of all purchases are for services, not goods. So the initial proposal that the governor came out with on sales tax was to take and expand that dramatically so that the sales tax would apply to more and more items, not just consumer items, but business items as well. And that stirred up quite a bit of controversy. But the goal was, if we can broaden the base sufficiently, then we can lower the rate. We wanted to lower the rate from 6.875 down to 5.5. We would have gone from the number 7th highest in the country down to the 27th lowest. And so it was a goal that we thought people would go, that makes sense, and that 20% reduction in essence would be seen more favorable. But the problem was, for businesses, they saw this as taxing things that really haven't been taxed before. They really, as you know, when you propose a new tax, you get a lot of pushback.
And of course, their argument is that we just pass that tax on to the consumer, and it's an indirect tax on the consumer in any event. So.
And it does flow through the economy. They're right about that. And so I think the key about sales taxes is at this point, the governor has decided to pull back on the sales tax expansion because he doesn't want to expand it just to consumer services. Because if you do it just to consumer services, then you really are putting more of a burden on the middle class again, and he doesn't really want to do that. I think we'll see, the Senate is looking at some sales tax issues in terms of adding some components to sales tax like clothing. Now, clothing is a really interesting issue because 41 states tax clothing. We do not. There are some states that have no sales tax at all, but if we did it, we would be the 42nd state to tax clothing. We started off with a proposal that had the sales tax applying only on items that are $100 or more. And that was because 75 to 80% of all clothing purchases are for items $100 or less. Mm-hmm. And so that really helped with the lower income folks so that you could buy essentials, you wouldn't have to pay that tax. But there are a lot of people who really believe that our time has come, that it doesn't make sense for us to have all these people come to Minnesota and buy clothing items for free. The Mall of America, of course, wants to keep that exemption there. But the thing is, at the Mall of America, 50% of the sales are for tax-exempt clothing, and the other 50% are not. And our push was, well, if we can lower the rate to 5.5, that means all the other 50% is at a much, much lower rate. So the clothing thing is a hot button item. I remember traveling around the state. I would almost always ask in a town hall meeting, how many people were in favor of taxing clothing and how many were not? And it was almost always 50-50.
Interesting.
And people feel strongly about it too. So it is a tough issue. But anyway, the sales tax is too narrow, and when we take a look at going forward in the future with our economic forecast, we see the income tax revenue growing because the economy is recovering and more jobs. Mm-hmm. The property tax revenue is going to stay fairly steady, but the sales tax is not going to grow at all because we have such a narrow base, and the economy that's growing is the service economy primarily. So it's something in the long term we need to address at some point.
Let's talk a little bit about, I think that's a good segue into talking a little bit about long-term issues. Now, obviously, much of what we've been talking about here today has been about specific issues that are before the legislature or before your department right now, and you have to make a decision on them. But obviously, you must be thinking about what kind of 21st century tax structure should Minnesota have, both in terms of where we wind up vis-a-vis other states, but also in terms of giving appropriate incentives for economic growth and related topics. Talk a little bit about the process your department uses for long-range planning, and if you can give us a little peek into what might be some of the things we might see coming down the road. We've talked maybe about some of them, but more globally, let's talk about what the tax system might look like 10, 20 years out.
Well, that's an excellent question because there are a number of trends that are occurring that we have to be mindful of. I know, as you mentioned, not that long ago, you had the state demographer and the state economist on the show talking, and kind of what they keep talking about is we have a real problem on the horizon in terms of the aging population. And for our income tax system, as more and more people get into the older age brackets, they tend to make less money, retire, and so the income revenue from the older population is a problem. Because I think in the next 28 years, we're going to have 1.2 million more people in the state of Minnesota, and of that, 850,000 are going to be over the age of 60, and so that's a problem. And the growth in the lower, the younger age deciles is really modest, if at all. So
I think the state demographer told us last year we will soon have more people who are older than age 65 than our school age, and this is the first time in our history for that to be true.
Well, it has huge implications for the healthcare system, obviously, but obviously for the revenue stream. So when we look in the future, we try to take these trends. We look at, and as I mentioned a little bit earlier about the economy becoming really more of a service economy. So we've got our sales tax really focused on goods, not services. That's a long-term problem. You've got an income stream, income tax that is going to decline over time. And then the property tax, you can only take so much. I mean, the property tax is fairly regressive. So part of the goal that we have, especially with Governor Dayton, is to make our tax system more progressive. And that's one of the reasons he's asked to include a new fourth tier for those folks who make married people who make over $250,000 taxable income, to add a new fourth tier at 2% additional rate, because that will help, at least in the short term and some of the long term, generate more income tax revenue. You know, one of the things we've been seeing around the country, a number of other states have been trying to eliminate their income tax and expand their sales tax. There were 4 or 5 or 6 different states trying to expand or increase their sales tax base or their rate at the expense of their income tax. Well, that's kind of short-sighted because that really, I mean, I think it's it's smart in the sense of generating more money from a sales tax base, which I think long-term you need to do, but it's really problematic for the regressive nature of sales taxes. State sales taxes tend to be regressive because they tend to be sales taxes, which are regressive, and property taxes, which are regressive. And if you don't have a robust income tax component, you're going to have a fairly regressive system. So our goals really in looking to the future is taking the economic model that we have, which shows a nice, slow recovery at this point, and seeing that we will generate more income tax revenue from that, but hopefully even more after the addition of the fourth income tax tier, if that passes. But also, we do need to look at doing something on the sales tax revenue side to make sure in the long term that we've got more revenues from the sales tax, and we try not to rely on the property tax so much. Now, there are other areas like the corporate income tax. That's not part of the three sources that I mentioned. Alcohol, tobacco taxes, those are also not part of the three sources of revenue. And I think that's one of the things that some of the people are looking toward expanding the tobacco tax and the alcohol tax, in part to take care of the social needs that come with abusing of alcohol or tobacco usage, but they also do provide pretty good revenue too. But I just will say, as a quick aside on the tobacco tax, the governor was convinced to include an increase in the tobacco tax of 94 cents a pack. That was really solely based on health reasons. We're really not doing it for the revenue. It does generate about $360 million of biennium in revenue, but it's really designed to get people to stop smoking or to slow down their smoking, because the long-term effects of smoking, Dr. Ellinger would say, the Commissioner of Health, are really pretty dramatic, and we've got to do something to slow that process.
You know, when you talk about taxation, particularly income taxations, you know, it becomes a hot button issue. People have their sound bites that they want to talk about with regard to particular issues, and one side will say, you know, we need to move it to progressive, raise more revenue. Another side will say, well, that affects behavior, and if you raise taxes too high, people move. And of course, we recently were treated to the governor of the state of Texas recruiting people in California to move to Texas because California, of course, has had recent tax increases. Texas doesn't have a state income tax. Setting aside where people may line up philosophically and politically on those questions, from the professional standpoint, is there data to support the argument that as tax revenue goes up, people make choices and move? I mean, does it depend on where you stand in those various rankings? I mean, what do you know from the standpoint of what we can measure, actually look at?
That's another good question. The answer is no. There is no data that supports tax flight or whatever. Part of the problem, obviously, is that people's moving decision is usually a complicated decision. But there have been a number of studies in New Jersey and another, about 10 years ago, they raised their rates, and they found absolutely no difference for the higher income, no difference in the movement. And people have studied this over and over again, and there is no credible evidence that there's any measurable response to higher income tax rates. And I think one of the things that, I mean, you hear people talk about it, and you hear anecdotes, but, you know, I will have to say that as I was traveling around the state, I heard anecdote after anecdote where people would say, I think I should pay more. I think my fair share should be more, and I'm happy to pay more to support the education system, the infrastructure. So you have people on both sides. You do hear this refrain, well, you're going to drive away the job creators and the people who have the investments. But, you know, there's something, and the governor answers, I love the way the governor answers this, and that is, he says he's been hearing this for 30 years. And that every time you're going to raise rates, you're going to lose people, and we'll turn into a vast wasteland here in Minnesota. But look at Minnesota. Look at the quality of our education. Look at the quality of our infrastructure. Look at the quality of our economy. In today's paper, as you mentioned, there's another article about how fast Minnesota is recovering from the recession. We're like number 4 in terms of the country of states that are recovering faster than other states. And that's partly a resilience and the dynamic diversity that we have in Minnesota with our economy. This is a pretty amazing economy here, and I think one of the things that we're learning is that it's very robust. And if you want to make money, which we like people to do, is to make money, you want to be where the action is. And this is one of those states where there's a good economy. You've got high incomes. We're like ranked I think it's 11th overall in terms of per capita income among the states. We're in the 11th. We used to be 26th 50 years ago. We have a steady incline in the per capita income ranking in Minnesota. That shows you that people, when you have high incomes, you tend to pay more taxes, you get more services for that. So here's the equation. We have a lot of people who are investing in Minnesota, who want to grow their business here. They're concerned about taxes. Of course they are. But on the other hand, it seems to me not likely that they're going to walk away from this dynamic opportunity to make money here in Minnesota.
We have a question from a viewer from New Hope who wants to know, where does Minnesota really rank on issues, income, sales, property taxes compared to other states? I think we've answered pieces of that as we've discussed matters over the past hour, and we're running out of time here. But I would ask you, is there a ranking that you would look to, if the general consumer wants to get an answer to that question, where would you send them in terms of getting information about that?
We, the local, what's the name of the company, of the agency, the Minnesota Taxpayers Association has a ranking. They've changed their name recently. That's why I was confused. But they have a ranking that shows that we're about 15th. If you take all the taxes combined and per $1,000 of income, we rank about 15th to all the other states. And that's why I was saying in terms of the ranking that you get from the in terms of per capita income, we're like number 11th, and we're like number 4th in terms of recovery from the recession. So you have to look at those things in juxtaposition of one another. But the Minnesota Taxpayers Association does a pretty good job. If you go to their website, I think their old website is still there. You can get that information.
We've got about 30 seconds left. I would just ask you, Commissioner, you enjoy your work? Do you like what you're doing?
I love what I'm doing. I love working for the governor. He's a great governor to work for. He's really smart. He's hardworking, but he really appreciates all the work I do, and I'm having a great time.
You came from the private sector, but you'll go back someday to doing other things, I'm sure, right?
I don't know. I'm kind of liking this gig.
All right. Well, very good. Well, we've run out of time. Commissioner Franz, I want to thank you for joining us tonight to talk about revenue issues. I want to thank our viewers for joining us. I want to remind you that we will be back next week with 4 distinguished guests from the legislature to help unravel the mysteries of St. Paul, and we'll be with you every week until the legislature goes home. And until that day, thank you and good night.
There's much more about your legislators online at pioneer.org. Find out more about the history of the program, who's been a guest, and watch all our past episodes. There's also a photo gallery, informative links, and much more. You can also get involved and stay in touch by following us on Twitter and join the discussion on our Facebook page. Thank you for watching Your Legislators. Your Legislators is made possible in part by the generous financial support of MAPE members, making Minnesota clean waters, safe communities, quality education, and veterans care happen. We work hard for Minnesotans. Minnesota Farmers Union, committed to helping develop and strengthen Minnesota rural communities since 1929. On the web at mfu.org.